pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda is we asked Joe Picorni to come in for Suffolk County Water Authority to talk to us about what the procedures would be moving forward. We're looking at potentially putting a well field in Sagem's Woods, and we're also looking at the potential for bringing municipal water to the bringing Suffolk County water to our municipal buildings. So, Joe, do you want to say anything before?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just give a brief introduction. On the Zoom link, we have Joe Picorni, Deputy CEO of Operations. We've interacted with Joe frequently through the West Neck Water contract negotiation, and at your request, we've invited him here today to discuss the feasibility of a water system that would service municipal buildings and potentially private connections if the town elected to do so, between the center of town here at the traffic circle and Sagem's Woods, which would serve as our potential well site, supply site. So Joe is here today to sort of walk the board through what that might look like from an engineering perspective, from a financial perspective, what the implications could be for the town and also for private property owners between here and there, and give an overview of the process sort of from start to finish as to timeline, what approvals are needed, costs, financial structure. The purpose of this discussion is really to serve as an introductory session towards what this could look like and how we might go about a project like this. So Joe?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It was nice to see everybody again today. Thanks for having me over here to talk about this. I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but hopefully this will suffice. So we have been talking for a while about this, and we looked at some possibilities. And I want to caution in the beginning is that I think a lot of what I'm going to do today is just to kind of educate the board on how we do business and what the options are, because there are a lot of different ways that this can be done. So I want to caution us on having any concrete, direction as to which way we're going to go after this. You're going to have to think about a lot of what I tell you afterwards here. Can I share my screen?
Christina? Yep, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, let me give it a try. Okay, let's hope it comes up. I see a blank window.
There you go.
There you go. Okay, so excuse my poor penmanship here when I designed this little water system, but this kind of gives you an idea of what could be done to get started, if that's what we say, to serve the 8 municipal buildings that are right now the subject of consternation on the part of the town, because I guess they need extensive treatment systems installed, and they are, I guess they're in violation, so they'd have to be brought up to speed. So bringing them drinking water is kind of a priority issue right now. So how would we do that? So the first thing that we need to understand is that the West Neck water system is pretty much at its capacity. So just extending the West Neck water system over to the town main area, that's not an option. That's not going to be a reasonable way to address this. There's not enough water in the West Neck system to do this. We are planning improvements to the West Neck system. Obviously, you know that we're doing the water main, and now we've recently, it looks like we're going to get this grant, this $500,000 grant. So we're working with the Dormitory Authority to execute that. We just sent them, I think was the last bit of information they needed yesterday, so that money is going to come in. And then our plan is to replace the 2 wells on the golf course with larger capacity wells this coming winter. So those wells will go from being a total of 50 gallons a minute of capacity to 200 gallons a minute of capacity. So there'll be 4 times the capacity of that system once we're done replacing those wells. But the fundamental issue remains with this area up in the town, that there's additional water is needed. And especially if we're going to serve additional residents, additional water is needed. So Sachem Woods looks like a very interesting piece of property. It's, I think, 35 acres. And that's what you see in that hashed area there with the blue box on it on my map. And this is all just for talking purposes. There's nothing finalized in any way. My survey team is out there actually as we speak. I think they're out there today surveying the property to get a good understanding of what the contours of the property look like and what its potential for development as a water source would be. But the way the Water Authority works when it comes to something like this is when a new water system is being developed, when we add capacity to an existing system, the Water Authority's customers and ratepayers pay for the well field and the source. So with respect to the cost of building a new well field on the Sachem Woods property, that cost is borne by the Suffolk County Water Authority and or its customers, basically its customers. And we put that into our capital budget, and we just make that another project that we work on any given year. We're building new wells and new pump stations in different parts of the county. And this just becomes one of the new wells and pump stations that we build. So theoretically, you know, looking at that property, we would add several wells. We'd get several hundred gallons a minute of capacity out there. And the next piece of the puzzle is to install water main to get the water from Sachem Woods out to the places where it's needed. So what I did was, and again, this is all my own idea of how this would be done, but installing water main on town roads is a lot less expensive than installing it on a state road. So North Ferry Road, AKA Route 114, is a state road, and I'm showing you where it is. You know where it is. Doing water main work on that road is very expensive. So I took Midway to get water up to the town area. And I think it's Thomas and Bateman that I brought water mains. These are theoretical water mains that will be put in. This is about 4,000 feet of water main, this green water main that would serve those 8 buildings approximately. And if you're talking cost, I'm figuring that approximately the cost of this water main is somewhere around $250 a foot. And so that conveniently works out to about $1 million in cost. And again, this is approximate. So the cost of putting water main is $1 million. And then to get the water connections to each of the facilities, you need what we call a tapping fee. So the Water Authority charges about $4,000 for a tapping fee. And then a private service line has to be run into the structure. So the private service lines are at the cost of the owner of the property. So that would be something that the town would have to pay for, separately part of this, not part of the project, but it would be out of a different bucket, so to speak. So what you basically have is you have 8 structures getting water, and you have $1 million in water main that goes in. Now, my first question to the town is, how do you want to do this? Right? I know, Jerry, you had spoken at some point about getting a grant of some kind, and that's an important question because that will inform me as to how we would go forward. So do you guys know?
I think initially, obviously, we'll look for funding. We'll look outside for grants, but how would it work? Again, would the town become a customer and it'd be put into the fee, or you need upfront money?
Well, I mean, if you did it with a grant, obviously we would apply for a grant to bring water up to this area. And I knowing the way these grants are going right now, and there is a grant window that's open right now, right? That closes on the 28th of July. And bringing water to contaminated wells ranks high on the EFC's scoring list when they're doing these type of projects. So I can tell you that it would probably be looked at, relatively favorably. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of agencies, municipalities putting in for money for grants, but it would score well because it would be taking contaminated private wells and replacing them with a public water supply.
Joe, there is no doubt that we would apply for a grant in this case. I mean, I think there'd be no doubt.
Do we apply or just Suffolk County Water?
Good question, Joe. Would we initiate that grant application or would you?
We could do it either way. I mean, right now, my grant writer we're probably going to submit 50 grant applications this round. So we're a little busy right now doing this. But he's sitting next door in the office next door. I don't want him to hear me, but we could do it if you wanted us to do it.
I think we
work with Jennifer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the way, I think we'd work with Jen and have Jen work, with you if need be.
To work together on it.
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. I mean, as with the DASNY grant, it's very clean if we do it, because like with the DASNY grant, I'm just dealing with DASNY and getting them the information that they need. And when they finally cut a check to us, we're doing the work. So we're going to submit for reimbursement. So it's a lot cleaner.
Right.
And then when DASNY reimburses me, I'm going to reimburse you, right? I'm going to cut the surcharge, for the $1.7 million or whatever the number was. I forget now. The $1.7 million in capital improvements is going to be cut down to 1.2, but it's very clean because I'm working directly with DASNY.
Right.
But we could work with Jennifer, and I think we already made an application once before, so we should be able to do it again.
Yeah, why don't we leave it with this, Joe? You have obviously this daily relationship with your grants writer.
Yeah.
Do they have the time and the energy to be able to put into this grant application to do it justice?
Yeah.
How does that person feel about working with Jen? Just give us a little feedback on that relationship, on how that best.
I can tell you, I was involved with Jen originally on the last grant, and we worked very well together. And
Okay.
I think what we did last time was we prepared the engineering report. So there's an engineering report that has to go in with every grant, and it basically provides the technical information on what's going in and the justification for it. We could probably produce that.
Okay,
And then Jen could handle all the paperwork, all the forms
Okay.
that have to be filled out.
That sounds reasonable,
bunch of
Joe.
information. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just want to have a sit down with Jen. You're applying for 50 grants. I don't want to get lost in the shuffle.
I know.
So, if she deals with on a, which way she thinks would be better. Do we do it direct or,
Yeah.
you do it?
but I mean, having them do the engineering report, I like that aspect of it because they're very familiar with doing these, and Jen doing the paperwork part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a clean cut right
I do
there where
too.
we do the engineering report. And I think that we could probably handle that. Again, it's July 28th, so it's almost 2 months out. So we do have some time to get it done. And I think
Get
that this
on
is
it.
relatively clean. The scope of work here is relatively clean. So,
Yep.
yeah. All right. So let's assume a scenario where we're getting a grant.
Mhm.
Okay, so we get a grant, and the grant would pay for all of this green pipe. In fact, I would even include in the grant the service line connections. We've done that already with a number of the grants that we've written so far,
Right.
Yep.
where we actually include the private service line. So you can include that also. I don't know that the EFC will pay for it. They may just take it out of the grant application, but you just
Can't hurt to try.
you break it down and you ask them for it. And if they don't give it to you, that's not the end of the world. So if you got the grant, this pipe then goes in, and this pipe goes in courtesy of the state, right? And now you have, let's call it a backbone, but you have some, basic water main that's installed in this area, which is really the area of interest, right? This is the space where you folks have the most nitrate contamination, and this is the area that you want to focus on.
Yes.
So that's my next question. So let's just say we get this done with a grant. We get the buildings on public water. And of course, we've got to build a pump station. So we forgot about that. But we've got to build a pump station. So let's just take a rewind and just go over what has to be done. So I told you we're surveying that right now. And what we intend to do is we intend to lay out what we think would be the facilities on that property and what they might look like. And we want to show that to the town so that you have an understanding of what it is we might build there and where it would be located, because I know you have constituents and neighbors and whatnot, and we want to be very sensitive to all of them and how this thing is laid out, because the next phase in exploring for water is to do a test boring. So that's where we drill down as deep as we can, and usually until we hit salt water. We probably will hit salt water here on Shelter Island. So we'll drill down until we hit salt water, and then we will pull back up and we will test different zones to determine where the best water is and come up with an estimate of what we think we can get out of that property. So we'll have an idea of what the water quality is like, you know, what are the constituents of the water, and then what's the permeability of the aquifer in that area, so we know how many gallons a minute we can get out of it.
Okay.
So hopefully the results of that are going to be great water quality and, you know, plentiful volumes of water.
So would the pump station be similar to West Neck Water, or would it be more significant?
You know, the West Neck Water Pump Station is similar to what the Water Authority built. Obviously, we would do it, you know, architecturally, it's going to look a little differently. But it's similar, Jerry.
Okay.
You know, our buildings are, I think they're about a 2,000 square foot building, our typical pump station. The wells would probably be very similar to the wells that are on the golf course. We'd probably use submersible wells, which are basically, when you go over and you see them, they're just kind of a pipe sticking out of the ground. So they would not be very significant. The only other thing is whether we would want to put some storage on this property. And when I say storage, I mean like a ground storage tank of some kind. We could bury it. But the thing that this system lacks right now is storage. And storage is what gets you through peak periods. It's what assures that you have finished water ready to go to pump out to the distribution system. So, you know, I want them to look, my engineers look at what it would take to put some storage in here.
So what's the yellow line?
Okay, so let's say we finished what we did. We put the pump station in. We're getting water out of it. We're supplying water to this area. This yellow line is now what we call a system improvement. And it's just what it's doing is it's going to connect up this new water system with the West Neck system. Okay. And by doing that, it's going to create redundancy and reliability far above what either of these systems had when they were separate. Right. And I don't think I have to explain that very much to you guys. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So we would do this, and this water main would be put in by the Water Authority. And we have a budget for what we call system improvements.
Mm-hmm.
We would do it based on that. And then it's obviously it's going to pass by homes, but I think that's the next thing to discuss. The next thing to discuss is who gets hooked up next.
Wait, Joe,
Yeah.
I just want to back up a quick second. You just, test bores, testing for quality.
Right.
If Sachem's Woods has the same problems that we think, you know, that are prevalent in the center, that's easily filtered at the out?
Well, that's a great question. That's a great question. So if we find high nitrates there,
Yeah.
nitrate filtration is complicated. You probably know that already.
No, I don't.
Okay, so filtration for nitrates, you know, the state-of-the-art technology for filtering for nitrates is to use something similar to a water softener, right?
Oh.
They use these resins that remove the nitrates. And the challenge with the nitrate removal system like that is that it generates a waste. So it generates, I would estimate probably about 10% of the water that you pump out of the ground is going to show up as waste when you're when you're filtering for nitrates. And the waste is a salty brine that has high levels of nitrates in it. And you need to dispose of that. Now, we have a couple of nitrate removal facilities. They're not pretty to operate. They're expensive. And it requires us to truck the waste to a wastewater treatment plant in order to dispose of it. So,
Joe,
we may be
excuse
getting-
me, that's what we have at the Presbyterian Church for the nutrition program. I mean,
yeah,
obviously on a much smaller scale.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So, I
So
mean,
the
that's
store-
pretty much that's the technology right now.
So that storage that you mentioned then, maybe we need not only for water for peak demand, but we need for storing the waste,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
waiting
well-
for trucking.
Yeah, if we need to put nitrate removal in here, then that facility that I described, that looks like the West Neck facility, it's gonna be much bigger than that. I mean, it's not gonna
Okay.
be gigantic, but it's gonna be a much bigger facility because you have to store the waste, you have to store a brine solution, which is a saltwater solution. So you take deliveries of salt, which looks like road salt, that goes into a large tank that's in the facility, and you're constantly making brine to regenerate the resin.
Okay.
I hope it doesn't come to that. I mean, we'll know with the test boring. When we do the test boring, that's one of the things we're going to find out is what the nitrate concentrations are. I mean,
No,
it's,
that was my number one question that BJ had just asked you.
Yep.
On a timeline on that water quality testing, approximately, is this weeks, months?
okay, so so I told you that my folks are out there laying out the facility. When we do the test boring, I want to do the test boring in the location that is close to where we would put the ultimate facilities. All right, because out here, 100 yards makes a big difference for water quality in wells. So I want to know that the location that we picked for the test boring is going to be relatively close to where the final production wells are going to go. So that's why we're going through the effort that we're doing right now, where we're laying out the facility, because I'd like the town to see that, and I'd like you guys to be comfortable with what we're planning if we do go forward. And if you do say you're comfortable with that, and I'm not sure what that process looks like for you folks, but if you do feel you're comfortable with it, then we would go and do the test boring. We would go into that location. We'd bring a truck in. We'd have to clear a little area on the property. We'd have to take some trees down in order to make an area about 100 by 100 for them to do the test boring. They need space. So yeah, so that's the process. How long does that take? You know, I'll probably have a layout for you folks within another month or so. I think we even told you that by the beginning of July, I think we were going to have a rough layout for you.
Okay.
So we give you that, and then when you get back to us and you say you think that this is okay, we can then come in with the test boring rig, and we can do that relatively quickly. But the test boring process would probably take 2 months or so to get complete and get all the water quality data back.
You're talking end of September then, by the time we
Yeah.
get the results,
Yep.
over a 2-month period of time.
I
And
would
that's
say
the critical question, Joe, the quality of the water that's there.
It really
I
is.
mean,
It
know it-
governs a lot here.
Right.
It really does.
So how does this dovetail then with the grant cycle? So we go ahead, we apply for the grants 2-3 months down the line. Maybe the complications are too much and we abandon the effort. I'm just thinking out loud here.
Good question.
And we just say thanks for the grant, no thanks? Is that how it goes? Yeah,
May not, if by September, they may not have even decided on them yet.
right.
So we'd be
Yeah.
able to just pull the application.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
Yep. I think that that's what we would do.
That's
I think
true.
that we would say in the grant and the engineer's report that a pump station is being designed and constructed at Sachem Woods. And that's what the pipeline layout is based on. And that the timeline for that would coincide with the construction of the water main, so that, the two are done at a relatively similar time.
Joe, before we go further, I just want to say a couple things about, number one, Sachem's Woods, when it was purchased in the 60s, was specifically purchased for potential well fields in the future. Evans Griffin had a real vision that this might happen down the road. That's why it was purchased. So while it is protect the land. That was the specific reason it was purchased. The second is, we've been saying all along, health and safety are the issues that we're trying to address here. And while, we think we can do an instant, water fix, delivery wise, we're also need to keep going forward with, our wastewater problems and how to protect the aquifer and how to make the aquifer a little bit better.
And the surface
So,
waters.
and the surface waters.
I mean-
So I don't want anybody to think that, we're abandoning one at the, option for the other.
Just exploring.
Yeah, and my third point, Joe, is, you've mentioned when we first started talking about West Neck Water, that you needed like 40% of an area before you would go in. So let's assume that this green main is put in, they would be included in the 40%, I guess. In other words, it's there. My real question is, what if we wanted to go south to, like to Smith Street where the plume really follows through to Menantic? How does that work?
Okay, so again, this was based on our discussions and
Right.
what Joe gave me. This was what I came up with. If what you're saying is, okay, now, and this kind of was where I was going also, now we want to add additional customers, right? Because all this main was paid for with the grant. So the cost of this main is basically paid for. But if you tell me now that you want to go forward with another extension off of this, okay, the question I have for you folks is that how or what criteria are you going to want to set for connection to the water system? Okay, because you could probably do a couple of things as a town board. You could probably only allow people to connect that have wells that are above the drinking water standard or are threatened by contamination. Or you could just,
Why would we want to limit that? Why would we want to limit that?
well, I'm just throwing it out there. Well, the only reason why I say it is because we're not going to have infinite water here, right? And the way I understand it, you have some places that have some serious issues with contamination. And I think you want to prioritize those, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Right,
You do, right?
yeah,
Yes.
So like, look, on the mainland, it's basically a free for all. If, people get together and they say they want to bring water main into their neighborhood, they contact us, we give them an estimate and we make it happen. Here where we're water limited, and you want to make sure that the people that are most in need of clean drinking water get it, it makes the process a little more complicated. So in other words, if I run a water main, say there's a house over here, let me just see if I can zoom. I can't, but let's just say there's a house over here that wants service because their well is contaminated and we've got to bring the water main here 500 feet to get to this house. Do you want to allow anybody along the route? Because this goes to your 40% question, Jerry. What we do is we say we take the cost of the water main, we divide it by the number of homes along the way, right? And now you have a per home cost. And what the Water Authority says is in order for a project to go, we need 40% of the homes to sign up in order to make the project go. We don't need 100%. We don't need every homeowner to do it. In other words, we don't get paid completely for the water main. We kind of figure that one day we'll get paid when everybody hooks up, but we need 40% to go forward with the project. So my question is, and you can see how that complicates things, right? Because if along the way, let's just say there are 10 houses along the way, we would need 4 homes to connect. Now, are we saying that they need to be 4 contaminated homes?
well, I think,
Or
won't that depend on your quantity test, on your flow rate test? We would back that out. Thank you. Right, we would just we'd have to sort of back out towards, to a criteria.
I think BJ and Joe, to answer your question, we've asked the Water Advisory Council to start putting together a letter to the residents, and we're specifically addressing the entire triangle area that we've, identified as, dangerous, potentially dangerous. So I guess that would be Amber, you want to, well, who's handling that? Good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So if you wanted to create an area, like you said, that triangular area, you could say, and you wanted to say that going forward, or the first step or the first phase is anybody in this area
Yeah.
that wants to hook up can be hooked up. That
Yeah,
would make
I was thinking on a larger scale, looking at the entire main part of the center of the island
Uh-huh.
and looking at zone A, B, C, and D, dividing into quadrants, kind of see, doing water testing at Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta, finding out which ones rank higher and lower, and then rank order them according to the way the water tests out.
Okay.
So that you would identify right away whether it's a triangle, a square, or however you decide to divide it up into an X number of zones. You could prioritize the zones from poorest water quality to best water quality. And I think if I lived in the highest threatened zone, I'd be much more apt to say, I'm on board right away. I'm telling you.
Right.
Because if you allow individuals, you talk about 10 houses, the house to my left and the house to my right, the house across the street and the house behind me test somewhat differently. But if I know I live in an area, this is a dynamic situation that's going to be constantly changing because water flows, underneath. So I'm kind of thinking if I'm in the highest zone area that has the most probability of having problems with my drinking water, that I'd be more apt to want to jump on this list up front. Does that seem logical?
What we're doing is we're sending out a mailing to anybody who lives in that designated triangle area that has been
Defined.
something that we've been aware of for a while. And so what we're going to do is we're going to break that down into areas dependent upon watershed. So the watershed sort of divides that triangle in a very interesting way. So we're going to base the different areas on watershed and just like kind of zoning it out so that we know that, people in this area, their groundwater is going a certain direction. People in this area, their groundwater is going a certain direction. Just gives a better understanding of wastewater flow, et cetera. So we're going to send that out and hopefully we get a good number of people who want to participate in this so that we can go out and get very recent data on their current well quality. And I think that will also help people. It'll do a few things. It'll raise awareness of the water quality in their area or in their personal well, which they may have not tested in the last few decades. And then it will also provide the town with more accurate and specific data to certain areas that we know are in the giant bubble of concern. So we'll be able to better target areas that we know have issues. And there are some areas that we've had people come to us and say, hey, this is what's going on. I'm concerned. This is what I'm finding in my well. And so we kind of already know where those areas are, kind of School Street, things like that. So it wouldn't take much to extend the line down School Street. But, so once we kind of have more results, we'll be able to see where there are hot spots or where the homeowners may have more concern.
And it's also target, again, with the WQI funds for remediation of the effluent. So it's two-pronged, it's not just supply.
Right.
So what you're describing to me seems much more workable than what I was describing to you at the beginning. If you define an area and you say that anybody that's in this area can be hooked up, if they want to be hooked up, then it's easy enough for us to do what we do. And again, we have, our rules and regulations are that we need 40% of the people to hook up. We actually have a new rule and regulation that says 25% of the people need to be hooked up, but there needs to be contamination in the area. But it sounds to me like there is. So it's very possible that you're going to meet the threshold to go to 25%. So you'll only need a quarter of the homes to want to hook up or commit to hook up in order for us to put the water main in.
So Joe, I think the biggest question from the public is going to be, what's the bottom line? What's it going to cost the taxpayer? What's it going to cost the homeowner? So, those are numbers we're going to have to try to.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of how, if you gave me an area, I could take a look. If we said, okay, this is a given, this is in, and now the area is over here, for instance. So now I need to run a water main over here and get water main on all the streets. I could do that. I could calculate the cost of the water main, and I could figure out the per home cost per each of the residents.
Stephen, legally, I know Suffolk County Water Authority has the ability to put water wherever they want to put it, basically.
Yeah, unless,
Referendum wise, would it only be based on if we needed to go to bond, or what would the town, what would the town approval need to be?
well, it's my understanding that the town can expend town monies for contaminated areas and pay for the water main. The people who want to connect have to pay for it. So the
Right.
homeowners have to pay for it. We can't pay for that, but the town can, in contaminated areas, pay for the water main to be installed. Now, when you talk about how we're going to get the money, we'll obviously exhaust grants. And if that's
So I'm just asking, is it subject to referendum?
only if you're going to bond for it.
Okay,
Right.
But if you have money in the budget, you just have to issue a resolution and pay for it. If you get grant money, same way. But if you're going to bond for it, then it's subject to permissive referendum.
Right, so if, for example, grants don't come through, we don't get any grant money, and this is a, $1.5 million project, let's say, I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
So then we'd want to go to bond, so then it would need a referendum.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot of these. We're doing more than ever right now in all these different spots on the island where they found perfluorinated compounds, the PFCs, the forever chemicals. So in fact, we're doing a big one in Manorville right now. And it's a huge job because there's a lot of water main. It's not a lot of homes. It's like 64 homes on the Brookhaven side of the Peconic River, but it's 22,000 feet of water main. And we've gotten grant money for that. And we've gotten CDS money too from the federal government, from the congressman. But once you have something where it's like a matter of doing an extension, it's very easy to quantify it and say, this
Right.
is how many homes, this is how much the water main costs. And the town of Brookhaven specifically recently, Ed Romaine, has participated and has helped pay for the water main to lower the cost for the homeowners. Actually, in the case of Manorville, the entire water main is being paid for by a combination of town funds, CDS funds, and what else was it? ARPA money.
Right.
That actually the town money was ARPA money.
right.
Yeah.
So Stephen, and I keep saying triangle for lack of a better word, but that's what we've identified. Someone had asked me, would the referendum be specific to the people that can hook up? Or would it have to be a town-wide?
That's, in my understanding is townwide.
We're bonding town money.
Right,
Yes,
yeah.
because it's coming out of everybody's
Yeah,
time.
Right, yeah, okay. Any other questions? of Joe?
Just a comment. Would we do this in phases? In other words, what I see right here now is the green line, the main, bringing the water to the 8 municipal buildings. That if there's good water there, that would be part of phase one. Is phase two is the expansion phase to the triangle? Is phase three beyond the triangle? And my other question is that the way we would lay it out? Or would we make the priority, the triangle first, and the municipal building second? And would there be further opportunity for grant monies if we were to work towards getting the water from Sagem's Woods to the center of town and hooking up the 8 municipal buildings? Could we apply for additional grant monies to get the main to where we need it in the triangle? Would that be a possibility, Joe, that, down the road, we could, next year, could apply for another grant, perhaps to do that? Is that feasible or not?
I'll tell you, Jim, if you know where the triangle is, you obviously know where the triangle is, but if
Do it
we
now?
wanted to, we could
Do it.
make that all one big project.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's didn't
Yeah,
come out
not
of.
just this water main, include the triangle also.
If we can get a grant.
Again, I think, you talk about phases, again, health and safety, we identified the municipal buildings that we can start with without having to get to buy in for their hookups. Joe's identified that we have problems with our water that we need to
Right.
either put in a community well or do something.
Let me add a few comments to this. I think, it's it's excellent that we're having this conversation about the broader impact of this particular project. But I think at this stage, our focus as a municipality should be on the infrastructure that's presented right here in front of us. This is an extremely attractive opportunity to not only solve our compliance, regulatory, and drinking water quality issues for the municipal buildings, but also to backfeed a connection to improve service to the West Neck water system at a price that the town could never really achieve on their own. So just simply looking at this diagram here, the connection to West Neck water is an incredible increase in their own resiliency. That's coming at no cost, potentially, to the municipality. The development of a supply field at Sachem's Woods, safely, that's a six-figure adventure to simply just lay out, test, evaluate the water conditions. Those are resources that we historically have not had to even go down this road and explore this from a feasibility standpoint. So the idea that the town could solve the water quality and compliance issues simply in the municipal buildings for, $1 million or less, call it less than $2 million, is an incredible opportunity that, we should be looking to act on in this grant cycle. The WAC is concurrently working on surveying the surrounding area to understand not only what the private well quality issues are, but also to gauge the appetite of those private property owners as to whether they'd like to connect to a system like this. So I think it's premature for us to, at this juncture, consider a broader, phase 2, phase 3. The most important things at the doorstep are, one, understanding what resources are available at Sachem's Woods to use. That's the preliminary choke point. Who can we supply? What will it cost to deliver that water? And then, at a later time, look to see who might need or who might want to connect to such a system. It may be that there isn't an appetite in the neighborhoods to connect, and so that's not a concern that we have to worry about. The municipality can't compel any private property owner to connect. So at that point, it's an individual decision. And this infrastructure would give those folks, I think, the most achievable opportunity to connect if they wanted to or needed to. My emphasis to the board would be on, look at what you have here as a really achievable project that serves so many important purposes to the town. And also, we're double dipping here with helping the West Neck water system and all those customers as well. So
and you're establishing a beachhead. You know what I mean? You're creating a backbone
Right.
that can grow in the future.
Joe, there's grant money. What's the breakdown usually on that grant? Is it 100%, 90, 10, 75, 25?
It's the WIA grants that we get are 60%.
60, 40?
60%. Yep, 60%. Yep.
60, 40. All right. That's an important piece. Because when you talked about that, why not throw in that little thing to the triangle? I was just trying to save money if down the road.
Yeah.
If it was 100% fundable, why not do it?
Jim, I'd say that's a totally appropriate approach.
Yeah.
Apply for it next year when we have a really good understanding of who maybe needs this service.
Yeah.
And one other point I'd like to make about these particular issues is that the process for, as Joe had described, filtration for nitrogen issues, having to backfeed the backwash or the waste, that's what's happening to these homeowners now who are using reverse osmosis systems, or if they have these other higher capacity systems like we do at the church. All of those contaminants are being, temporarily removed from the drinking water stream at that house, but they're going back into the ground.
Yeah, they're going
the same
back
place where you filtered them out again. So, if you're an individual homeowner who has an RO system in their house, that system is pulling out the nitrogen and other contaminants. It's putting them into a very high concentration solution. And then for most folks, it goes right back into their septic system, right back into the ground
Absolutely.
where they're drawing the water from. So you're not actually really, you're improving the drinking water situation,
But yeah,
right? So
but not long-term, but I want to sidetrack here for a minute, because wait a minute. This occurs to me that this is happening then for people who use ROs for salt. The salt-
everywhere,
The concentrated salt waste goes back into the aquifer.
Correct.
So this is no solution.
Well, it's a solution in the sense that it gives you potable water
Right.
in a situation where you don't
But
have it.
long-term.
But in terms of sustainability, that's perhaps not the best approach for a broader community.
Another thing to consider, however, when we're talking about our moratorium. Just
Well,
saying.
and again, it's the two-pronged approach. It's not just.
And we discussed, in terms of the health and safety of people who live in the Central Island, that multi-pronged approach and the pushing of the IA systems. And I see, people from WAC here, that obviously those incentives to get those IA systems in the ground in the center has to be started now. I mean, it's already started, and there are people in the center of town that have put them in, but we need to do a real push on that, that
They were
is,
aware.
it's gotta be a multi-pronged approach. If we're gonna clean up the general health hazards to the center of town. The other comment that I have is the school, always the school, because, I know, I get our enrollments down to 185, and you got another 60, 70 people that go in there every day to work, and you have people that visit, and it might be 300 people there in a day, but it is the number one concentration. When you bring this main up to service the 8 municipal buildings, that's close enough right by that if the school wanted to hook up, it wouldn't cost them an arm and a leg. They have funds to be able to do those kinds of things, to be able to hook in, because I would think that would be a desirable thing if the school is going to sustain itself and be here for the next several decades, and we're going to have a school system here, is to have potable drinking water into the school system itself. So that would be something that would be a nice thing. If I sat on a board of education and I saw that main was sitting right there, why would I not want to encourage our fellow town board members to want to be able to jump at that opportunity? And I realize it's not endless supply of water, but I do think when you're dealing with younger children at a pivotal time in development, and getting high quality of water, it's different with a 75-year-old than I'm thinking about 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds that go to school that may be drinking water that is less desirable to drink.
Well, they are included they're one of the red dots on there, so they
Oh,
are
they-
included in the
okay.
analysis. But you do get back to a question that I wanted to ask you, Joe. When you're working on the test borings, are you also, when we started to wander into the conversation of including the whole red triangle, are we going to be testing the quantity?
Right, so when we do the test boring, we'll not only get an understanding of what the quality is, we will be pumping actively different sections of the aquifer, and we'll get an understanding of the quantity, what's available there. So
Yeah,
we'll learn both of those things.
Yeah, I'm concerned that we couldn't really support the whole red triangle with one well field. So that's a consideration in future
That can be
expansion.
expansion,
I've said it before, but you folks, you have the irrigation ban out here, and so water goes a long way out here compared to the mainland. The average person out here is using, I think, like 30,000 gallons a year, and the average person on the mainland is using 130,000 gallons a year. So you guys get a lot more connections, so to speak, per gallon per minute of well.
Our irrigation ban is just in West Neck Water District.
Is that right?
Well, it's supposed to be a
That's
cistern.
important.
Yeah,
Well,
the new installations are from cisterns, and that's a topic for.
But I think that, as we go forward, you're going to want to consider doing something similar with the public water system.
Joe, your presentation at the East End Supervisors meeting, I took copious notes and I shared them with my colleagues here following Tuesday. Now, it was a great presentation by you. And it really opened up our eyes to a lot of realities of what we need to do, not just for this town board, but for future town boards in terms of water conservation.
Sure.
So, it was a great presentation. You should be very proud.
I appreciate that.
Great.
BJ, just to maybe alleviate some of your concerns, the system we have at the church, the nutrition program, we collect those contaminants
Yeah.
and disposal. We don't put them back into the.
Right, no, he was saying, that you
Yeah.
truck them to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do.
Wastewater treatment.
We collect them, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very expensive,
It's expensive.
very expensive.
And
Like
it's-
Kevin just
And it
said.
could be done now, can it be done 10, 20 years ago, from now, when people who live in that area where they're being disposed say, I don't want it here anymore.
Yeah, and so Joe, I mean, and Joe, but as we get closer, we know if we're even have to filter for nitrates, that is a very impactful thing to know in terms of what is eventually going to cost the customer for water, because that cost of the expensive disposal, now, I'm not saying not do it, I'm just saying it just has to be factored in.
Sure, and that is a great, that's a great avenue to explore a little further, because when we have a discussion about, well, what are your alternatives? Do you need this robust infrastructure? Can we do this on an individual level? And that's precisely the problem we're running into now as a municipality, in that the individual operator, individual system model is breaking down for a couple of reasons. The first is that compliance has become heavier and heavier. So obligations as a public water supplier, these are public buildings serving water to the public, so our rules are different than just a regular residential house. Those compliance and regulatory requirements are ever growing. They're becoming more costly, more challenging. They're imposing more equipment for us to put in place at these facilities. And so these individual buildings are turning into water systems of their own, and they're not linked currently. So when we are faced with the challenge of, say, treating for nitrates, and that problem exists in multiple buildings, well, that same complicated, expensive system that we're talking about doing once at scale to serve everybody in the community, we now have to install and operate, 4, 5, 6, or half a dozen different systems right next to each other. And we lack that connectivity to get any sort of economy of scale. Those systems are expensive to operate. They're complicated, and they require a licensed operator. So we're kind of backing ourselves into a West Neck water situation again, which is a totally legitimate option to have your own, municipally run system. But we ran into this problem not too long ago. We struggled to find an operator. We struggled to find the budget and the manpower to govern these types of districts and systems. And that's a direction we're ultimately heading in with these municipal buildings. The same problem again. So, there's been a lot of discussion about community wells, community systems, that I would describe as sort of the private option, where you're essentially building your own public water system. Mm-hmm. And that requires a level of expertise, financial backing, and manpower that we have already demonstrated, we don't have necessarily interest in getting involved in. And that's the same answer that our other adjacent, communities have said themselves. There's a reason why these small systems don't exist much more, because the burden is very difficult to do. And the last thing that I would add, that's very relevant to this conversation about alternatives, is that the problems we're facing are not ones in the short term that we can deal with exclusively on the wastewater side. The problems we're talking about here, Orient is experiencing a very similar situation now with PFAS. You can't IA your way out of some of these challenges, or these challenges that we're facing. They're not going to allow for the immediate response to public health that we know we have. There are several instances, and I know we're going to uncover more through this survey with the WAC, where folks have drinking water levels that are 5-6 times the potability limits for nitrogen, and that's only looking at one contaminant. Right. So when we talk about making an investment into a type of system, being able to treat in a cost-effective scale the full spectrum of issues that we may be facing in the future is very relevant to making this decision.
Joe, could you drop screen share, please?
Say that again, drop it?
Yes, just so that way.
Yep.
See.
Okay, any more questions? So what would be the next, they're doing the surveys, they're
They're doing the
gonna.
survey,
yeah.
they have to do their testing, and we'll be eager to see that in 2 months, the water quality test, and the amount of water that's
But-
there, the quality of the water.
But if we want to proceed, we have to apply for the
We
grant.
do have to apply for that, that was my next time. We should not wait on that. We should get hopping on that.
So do we have the grants committee, or do we just have it talk?
Jen, we'll talk to Jen.
Okay.
Amber and I will hook up with Jen and get this thing rolling.
Meg, anything else?
I mean, not really. I think that if we get a good response from the survey, we'll really understand where our hotspots are. And that will help focus any expansion that would be needed.
And realistically, what kind of time frame do you see?
I'm hoping into July.
Okay.
We have the paperwork pretty much ready to mail out, so we're
Better
gonna
get
get
the
started
links
on that part.
You know,
Yeah.
response.
Just get the website up and then we should be good to send it out within the next, I would say, week,
That'd
2
be great
weeks.
information.
And, you know, there's this possibility out there, I mean, I think this is obvious, but I'm just saying, queen of the obvious here. That, you know, that there isn't enough contamination, it's
Right,
not widespread enough,
Right.
that, you know,
No, it's
I mean, it's a way to
important, yeah.
think about, you know, it's just another, you know, we have to think of that, so this is important to
Or
me.
that there's not interest.
Right.
And that's
It's
okay.
not
And that's
interest,
okay as well.
yeah, so,
It's a very large area.
Yeah.
You know, we say, we're familiar with the triangle, but for people who aren't familiar, it extends from Daniel Lord Road, kind of as the bird flies, to Fresh Pond, all the way up past mini golf, and then back down to Daniel Lord. So it really encompasses a very large portion of the center of the island that has historically been an area of concern by the county when they did their countywide wastewater management plan and a few other studies. So it's that same area that we've been using for WQI when it came to prioritizing grants for septic upgrades, things like that. So it's kind of that same zone, but this will help us to kind of hone in on areas of that triangle and see where we really have a problem. You know, is it just sort of scattered throughout because someone just happens to be downstream of their neighbor's septic? Or is it really a concentrated plume in one area that is affecting multiple people? So it'll give us a better idea of what's actually happening. You know, because it is possible that you just have these random one-offs where someone just happens to have their well downstream of someone else's waste. So this will kind of give us a better understanding of that. If we have a cluster of 10 or 12 homes that are all high concentration, that's an area of concern. That's something to like target and talk to the homeowners about. But this will help define that.
You and I had talked about trying to talk to the testing company so that rather than homeowners being concerned that they're giving information about their well water and then wondering if it's going to have an impact on their house value.
Yes,
They're
yes.
selling, if we can have like, break it down into the quadrants, like you
Right.
said, is the testing company willing to do that? So that we don't ever have anything more than here's a square that
In this square,
encompasses
the
like
data
20 houses
is
or.
2 milligrams, 4 milligrams, 5 milligrams.
5 houses, 3 houses.
You know,
Just to encourage more people to sign up and do this. So have they agreed that they will?
I haven't gotten,
Oh, okay.
I have to talk to them about it.
I don't know how you plan to do this, but you definitely should contact and work with the Department of Health on this, because what you just brought up, Amber, is a big issue with the data.
Yes.
A lot of people, and the health department can tell you, because they go out and they canvass areas, and a lot of people won't even let them take water samples from their homes because they don't want that information to get out.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is a degree of confidentiality that has to be employed here. And you're gonna have people that are gonna be very sensitive about having their water tested, so.
But as a government, we gotta be careful because we can't be too confidential. We're not allowed
That's
to.
hoping that
Right, right.
well, the testing company can do it because we could get foiled, but they can't get foiled.
Correct.
We can only get foiled for the square.
Yep.
So we're hoping that they can give us the information, not based on house number, but based in this area, this quadrant, this is your average. This area, you know, kind of get the information that way so it's not home specific.
Yeah.
And then that'll let us know where our hotspots are.
When we work with the health department doesn't give us the specific results. They give us like general areas, you know, they'll say on this block, there are 3 houses that are impacted. So you need to put a water main on this block. That's as much as we get from them. We don't see the results.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we foil the county, that's what we get too.
Yep, okay.
Yeah.
Isn't the main purpose of this is to serve the municipal buildings first and foremost?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
town board's ready to proceed on that front.
Yes.
And then-
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
It's getting more expensive.
But I think it's all of
And
a
then it's
piece.
icing
Yeah.
to be able
Right,
to.
but it is all of a piece. I think, that we're getting data about the center writ large, that we are, that the WQI is ramping up its efforts to get septic money out there, I just feel like this is
This
is not scattershot, is what I'm trying to say.
And just to go one step forward from Amber is, we're not hooking up the town buildings so we can hook up more buildings.
Right.
We've identified our problem and we have to address it.
Right.
Anybody else?
While Joe's still here.
Joe's,
I just had one question for you, Joe, just with respect to West Neck Water. Could you send me an email with a contact person in the finance department? Because I don't, either before or after you've finalized the 500,000. Because I know we're coming up on 1 year for West Neck Water Board sitting down to look at the rates for the coming year. And I want to see what the impact of that 500,000 is going to be.
Yeah, so Chris Cachetto is our chief financial officer. He's the person you deal with. But you got to remember that the $500,000 is not going to come until the work is done. Because I have to give invoices to DASNY in order to get reimbursed. So if this work isn't going to be done until the winter, then that's the very earliest you're going to see reimbursement. So I think that, for all intents and purposes, this year, you got to close this year. I guess that's coming up, right?
Yeah, July 1st, I think.
You know what? I forget what it was. I thought it was Memorial Day, but I could be wrong.
I think it
But
is July.
either way, we need to do a reconciliation for this year, and it's not going to involve the grants. But as soon as we get the grant money, then we would apply it, and Chris would change the amortization schedule and change the amount that you would owe that following year.
Okay.
But
Okay.
Chris Cachetto, CECCH,
The name of the grant.
ETTO.
Okay, I've talked to him before, so I have his email.
He's our
Thank
person.
you.
Feel free to call him anytime you want.
Yeah, just
Great,
as.
thank you.
Okay.
Joe, before you leave, we're going to open it up to the floor, right? Because I know you don't want to stay on until the end of the meeting.
Okay.
So if anybody has any questions for Joe Picorni, now would be the time to come up and ask him. No? Anybody in this room?
No.
We know you love coming to the podium.
Julie Brennan from the Shelter Island Gazette. My only question for, I guess, Joe is, I recognize that the town owns the property at Sachem's Woods. I recognize that it was set aside specifically for well fields. I guess there was an understanding at the time that might be a place where there's good water underground. If it proves there's not good water underground, it doesn't mean the town still doesn't need water. Could Suffolk County, what are other options, I guess, for the Suffolk County Water Authority to find other well water on Shelter Island that could solve the problem for the
Good
town?
question.
Sure. So that would be the next logical thing, Lori. If that doesn't work out, then I think we would want to look at other town parcels to see what else is available and what other options we have.
Joe, is your hunch that the Sachem's Wood property is unusable, or is the risk that it's perhaps more complicated?
I'd just be guessing at this point. I mean, my hydrogeologists feel like it's a good parcel. One of the good things about it is that it's big, right? So it has a degree of watershed protection around it because there's nothing developed around it. There are houses, but they're relatively far away. So it does, it looks promising, but we won't know until we do a test boring.
There's also a USGS test well right at the intersection of Bowditch and Midway, right at the end of that intersection, which
Okay,
is
right there where the yellow meets the green?
Yep. So we can look at that well data.
I could say,
Great
well, if
idea.
you have the data, I'd appreciate it. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, I think it's in the WAC SharePoint. I'll find it and send it to you.
If you can do that, I'd appreciate it. That'd be very helpful.
Okay.
Good point, Max.
Is there data about quality?
Yeah, it's nitrate ammonia.
Oh,
Yeah.
I remember seeing it at some point.
we see.
I'll find it for you, Joe.
Anything else for Joe?
Nitrates are really the thing that I'd be most concerned about. Any other contaminant is relatively easily dealt with. I mean, there may be a new contaminant out there at some point that I don't know about. But at this point, from, pesticides, herbicides, even perfluorinated compounds, relatively straightforward to treat for. 1,4-dioxane, I hope you don't find that out here. We have that on the mainland. But like I said, nitrates is just, it's a whole different animal. And the big issue is it creates this waste stream that you got to dispose of.
There I go. Third wave. Just curious if there's a drought in the future, does the Suffolk County Water Authority address that? Does they say to the town, you have a drought, you're in a drought problem, or does the town decide that?
Bert, do you mean specifically like with West Neck Water District or?
No, if the town goes ahead with Statham's Woods, or something like that. Or how does it do with West Neck, same way?
Well, I mean, if there's a drought, we just started putting out weekly notices to all the towns. In fact, Jerry, you probably should have gotten that today. We sent that out.
Yep.
We're already in a drought. We're already in a period of, no rainfall. It's amazing right now. We're pumping water like it's July right now. So we're like a month ahead at this point.
Yeah.
So we will, we're going to notify all the towns as things progress. And if we want people to restrict their water usage, we will ask for it. It's a little different on Shelter Island because, like I said, you folks are already pretty frugal when it comes to water usage because you don't have that irrigation factor. Irrigation is the one thing we can control or try to control. So on the mainland, when there's a drought, we ask people to either not water or water odd even, or water during specific hours.
But Joe, all you can do is ask. We can actually legislate.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Anybody else? All right, Joe, thanks very much.
Okay.
Touch.
Let me know if you have any more questions. You know where I am. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Joe.
Okay, next on the agenda is town employee emails. Anybody want to give it just a quick?
The IT committee has been in the process of changing over from shelterislandtown.us to shelterislandtown.gov. So we're in the process of getting like everybody's emails. If someone sends you something to .us, you'll still it gets forwarded to your .gov. But we're trying to get people to hand out, like .gov is your new email address.
And was there any significant reasons for the change?
Because it just made more sense to be .gov. I think more people think of, municipality as .gov, not .us. That we're under the US, federal umbrella versus we're our own municipal government. So some committee people, I think there's a few more that may have, haven't logged in yet. So they may get kicked out and have to re-log in. So call Judy, she'll put you in touch with Kevin so that you can get reestablished with your emails. And it's the same with the town website. The town website is currently .gov, but also .us. So those two will get bounced, to the right one.
Yeah, right.
Which then kind of leads us to the next topic.
Just gonna say, keep going.
We've been going over this. And we've talked about this a little bit. And this, started from, BJ asking about whether or not we could do notifications. So, and good, Christina's here, so I'll probably let us.
We have a bitch meeting again.
Yeah. But that we're most interested in is Civic Plus. So we would want to go from using Squarespace, which is a small business website space, to something that is geared towards municipalities. But Christina has been working closely with them, so she can tell us about their proposal.
We did get 4 quotes from 3 different companies with Kevin, and then we did our search around. We called some people from the industry, municipalities around us, and it all led to this company, Civic Plus. Everybody says that this is the way to go, that you can choose any other option, but ultimately you will end up with this company. So they're definitely the best, the most recommended company in the industry. And I must say that they did work with us financially as well. Their initial quote was build a website for $20,000. Flexible, we reason out, we are a small municipality. We probably won't go as far as, highway department having 27 subpages and such. So they worked with us and came down to $14,000 for building a website. Then the annual fee, from the $7,000, they came down to $5,000 per year, with a 5% increase. After further negotiation, they further increased for 2 more years and wouldn't start until year 4. So they had some flexibility, which we really appreciated. But it still is a big budgetary ask, which we realize. And another thing we realize is that we're in the middle of the fiscal year. So yes, we want all of this that this new website would offer, to highlight some features, notices and alerts, subscription for the agenda. That was our priority. The ADA compliance was the biggest thing that we need to go for. Some form center, news, opinion pool was the interesting feature we offer. Agenda center, archive center, document center, that's something that we do on some level, but this would be done on an archival level, not just the way we do it currently on a website. It would be, apparently they say, easier to navigate for the residents. Just for reference, Southampton and Southold is using, and East Hampton, all East and South are using this company. So it's easy for anybody to go and compare how their website looks and what they offer. Job postings and bids, that's something that we don't do online. Which I noticed that Southampton have fairly robust website bidding. And there's a lot of administrative features for us on the back end, history log, intranet, dynamic page components, some scheduling that was interesting features for us, and mainly level of permissions. So we can kind of assign pages to individual departments or personnel, and they can kind of manage their own pages, and they wouldn't rely on 1 or 2 people within the.
That's nice.
So that's what we really want. ADA compliance, I mentioned, and
It dovetails with Outlook and SharePoint and all of that in some
let's
way?
level calendar and such.
Yeah.
But it would be us inputting the document the way we do right now. And just if you go to the Southampton, you can see with Southold how their agenda center is organized. It's way different, and mainly it stays there as for archival purpose. So that came up into discussion after the rental law has been changed, right? But also somebody recently emailed me, hey, and had solid information about what he's seeking for. This application was discussed at this meeting at the WMAC, then it was approved by the town board May 16th. And I wish to see this application is not on a website. Our practice is, as soon as something is done, it's taken off of the website. This way, it's kind of archival structure that you can go back and search all these applications from the past and there as well. So
That's a nice.
I see a value in that as
A lot of
well.
value in that.
Good feature.
Then the implementation period of this would be anywhere between 16 to 28 weeks. There are stages that we would go through to outlay our expectations, what we want to focus on. They would come back with some basic design, and we would work kind of hand in hand with them throughout the process. So depending on the speed of also our response and our engagement, that period can be longer or shorter, depends on our workload within the departments as well. Currently, they were able to break down the initial cost of $1,400 into the 3-year period. We wouldn't have to pay $14,000 right away in one payment. That broke down over 3 years to $4,666.67.
Do you know if that's payable at the beginning of the year in its entirety?
That would be right at the beginning as we started
So
processing.
I was wondering, if we could, if it's a July 1st, I'm just pulling this out, if we could pay 6 months this year, and then with the new budget,
Right, well, they've broken it down so that we pay, like, between the annual subscription fee and the initial implementation fee, we pay just under 10,000 this year, 10,000 next year, 10,000 the following. However, if the auditors would be accruing the full 15,000 implementation fee.
Yes.
So I need to find budget money for that as well as this new additional
Right.
5,000. So it really is still 20,000 that needs to be found in this budget year.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if this, I would imagine that if we had had this during the pandemic, it would have been a very, very useful tool, to keep in touch with the citizenry.
Yeah, as part of the
And so there's that option,
Yeah, it's much more user-friendly,
yeah,
yeah,
in terms of
using
funding.
the opera money.
I don't think this would qualify for
No?
I don't know, you gotta look, because I was watching, town of Southlow's giving money to all their fire departments.
Is it being used for infrastructure?
It was very vague what they were doing.
Or if it was reimbursing for?
No, it wasn't
COVID?
reimbursement. We'll
Okay, we'll have to look at that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because my understanding, it has to be infrastructure or
Well, it's-
very specific.
Yeah, so half of this is infrastructure, half of it is subscription. Oh, come on, electronic counts.
Take a look at that, I'm not sure. What's in the But.
So yeah,
Sure, is that-
anyway, so at this point, we're seeking short of $10,000. Again, we realized it's the middle of the fiscal year. We're up and running, so if the funding isn't there at this very moment, we will come with the budget request at the budget season and start in January.
Okay,
But
if we can't find the money, is there any sense that they will hold this pricing for us until?
yes.
Yeah.
They're waiting to hear back from us what we're saying about this proposal, whether we get approval or not. They are aware of the discussion happening at this point. So we kind of they're very flexible. It's a big company, like they're not gonna go, bankrupt if
Break
we
'em.
don't move
Yeah.
forward with them. But we need them more today.
So Christina, twofold, one, obviously, it's much more user-friendly for the taxpayers, but two, it's gonna coordinate all town business.
Yes.
Access in one place to everything.
Right. Yes, the flow will change significantly. The updates.
So there'll be some savings in employee time.
Yeah, it would be, somebody has less work, somebody else will have to do it, I always say. Yeah, it will be easier. It's, the current flow is, you need to post something on a website, contact these 3 people. Now, that would be, you don't have to do that. You can go on your page, you can update, reword, whatever you need.
And the notification will be there too?
And that's subscription for notifications, every time something is posted. I explored it with the South Old Town, I enrolled in several boards and committees, and on occasion, anytime there's a email, agenda has been posted,
Right.
location of the meeting, link to this.
Okay. Great.
And will this help clean up the discrepancies that happen sometimes where we post something one place, but it doesn't get posted in another? Or
Yes, so one thing that this is a company that builds only municipal websites. So they are not, engaging in any other business but the municipalities, county, towns, villages. So yes, the answer to the question is yes.
If we cancel something here, it's canceled all along the chain.
Yeah, they do a lot of bigger thinkings for you when they create the website at the very beginning.
Thank you. Okay, that's it on the actual agenda. Look around the table, Meg.
Aside from the mailing that we already discussed earlier. Our next CPAC meeting is Friday the 16th at 7 o'clock here. And that will be discussing the housing chapter, action items for the housing chapter. Green options is on Thursday, the 15th. Other than that, That's all I got.
Yeah, we met this morning with the Capital Planning and Grants Committee, and first thing we talked about is the renaming of the committee, but we decided we're going to stick with it. So we're not coming up with anything fancy. There'll be no change in the known as. Real Point is probably the big thing on the agenda. Joe has been in contact with Karen Vermette at the United States Army Corps of Engineers concerning Real Point. I guess they did have a selection committee that got together. Assessment by the federal government determined that there wasn't sufficient interest in remediation of Real Point to the extent that they thought would warrant it. However, the project did not qualify for that funding, but the Army Corps felt that they would be much more receptive to the ecosystem restoration project as an ecosystem, which is basically living shorelines, natural shoreline kind of thing, which, by the way, which is what First Coastal came up with 5 years ago in a report that we submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers. We weren't looking to go beyond something like a natural shoreline type of venture. However, we just this morning received some questions from Karen. Number one is the spit a hotspot of threatened or endangered species? Number two, what are your active ecological concerns? Number three, what protection measures have been taken in the past to restore the habitat and reduce risk to the habitat, which we have plenty of information on. Number four, what protection measures would you like to think would be the most effective, which obviously, so Joe and Jim Holligan will sit down and we'll go through this and we will come up and we will address these four questions. And then what I would like to do is have Joe and Jim hook up on behalf of Karen, have a Zoom meeting to go beyond the four questions and address several other concerns. But I would like to, there is things that beyond these four questions that I would like to see asked.
Jim, just on the habitat question, if you think about the habitat being Cockles Harbor, I just maybe would make the suggestion that you're in touch with, I know you Pep, but Cornell Cooperative.
Yes.
What would the impact be if Real Point didn't exist on their efforts at habitat restoration in Cockles Harbor? That's just a question to, and it might be added to your report.
Yeah. I mean, there are several of those because the overwash on further north on the Spit would happen.
Yeah.
The channel, if you didn't dredge annually with a mechanical dredger, would fill in. So it would not only affect the ecology of the Cockles Harbor and the habitat, it would also affect navigation and everything, and businesses and everything else. It's a pretty, I realize it's 2,000 feet of sand that goes out there, but we do have a way to stabilize that, an effective way, which is not outrageous, not expensive, and friendly, which is kind of in keeping with what we have around Mishomic.
Yeah.
The only part of this island that is really untouched, kept natural, is Mishomic shoreline.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else has been played with, including just north of the Spit, which is why we get no sand replenishment. So Joe and I will handle that, and we'll report back to you on those questions, but I will seek out additional information from various people on that question of habitat. Fresh Pond, Joe stated that the permit to remove the removal of toxic materials has been submitted to the New York State DEC. We have been in touch with a firm that's very well a good background in vegetation removal from Pennsylvania, who's been tasked with this effort. They'll be, moving forward with that effort. So things at Fresh Pond have been.
What kind of time frame is that project, once they start?
For the removal of the vegetation and toxic, we'd have to ask Joe, whether we're talking weeks or months.
Mm-hmm.
But that will go on. Obviously, the toxic material will go on once the project, and the phosphorus is removed from the bottom of the pond. That will take upwards of, as we said, almost a decade. ADA compliance, we're finished phase one. We're actively involved in phase two. We are waiting from Pam a more detailed plan of just how that's all going to go down. Phase three, as everybody knows, is actual construction documents, which would follow our approval of phase two if we're satisfied with the look of it and the functionality of it. And that basically is centered on getting people in and out of these headquarters and, accessibility into the place.
We're actively looking for grants for that too, Jim.
Yes, we will be. At the present time, we're using
Yeah.
block grant monies and our own monies, town budget monies to finance that. Am I right, Amber?
Yes,
Yeah, we
the
budgeted.
50,000
Right.
Yes.
set aside for PD came out of appropriations.
Right.
The 50,000, we're waiting to hear from the community development block grants for Justice Hall.
So we're asking for 3 times what we normally ask for.
We had budgeted for the Justice Hall, but then at the end, we took it out.
Correct.
Yeah,
Because
block grant money.
because we applied for
Right.
that instead.
right. So that, and that will, one project will spill into the other, and the idea, and I think Amber has brought this up about a year ago, that once we have both plans in place, would it not be more efficient if we did tackle both at the same time, cost-wise? Just in terms of accessibility in and out of the buildings, which is very important for Justice Hall as well. Our municipal wastewater treatment project, that was the focus of today's discussion. So, water really was the focus, but, I think we've talked enough about that. West Neck Water Infrastructure, we finished phase 1, the main line. We finished phase 2, the flushing of the system. We are involved in phase 3. We're about midway through. We've got about 3 weeks behind us. We've got about 3 or 4 weeks ahead of us. July 4th is hopefully the time that we're going to be finished connecting all 70 customers, if they choose to connect it up there, to their system. That'll all take place by hopefully July 4th. There'll be a T right at the main, and the homeowner or the business is responsible from the T to the business or the house. But we'll have everything in place right on their property, off town property, right to their property line to be able to hook up should they decide to.
And everything in place is the vault and the meter?
The meters, that's another big thing, because this is all going to be metered, and we're going to be able to read those meters remotely, as Joe said this morning. Item number 6 was Suffolk Shelter Island Heights Property Owners Corporation wastewater treatment and Bridge Street. And I think Joe and I talked about what we have on the plate right now in Amber, and we talked about probably picking this up, actively picking it up in late summer, early fall, because I think we have plenty on our plate right now, so we're going to try to prioritize that. The Shelter Island Community Center, we talked a little bit about, we're doing the bathrooms downstairs in the basement. When I say we, that's the Legion is doing that, so we're getting materials and labor supplied to us. So we were originally asking Brian for some help there, but I think we're moving forward with bathroom replacements downstairs, which was big. Condon Dock is going to be a fall 2023 project. Brian has stated that he would like to finish this up prior to his leaving his role as superintendent of highways. So that's something that
Do we know if,
That's the bulkheading?
yeah,
The bulkheading.
we're waiting with the DEC, any word?
No, he wasn't there this morning, so I couldn't ask him the question, but we'll figure that out. New York Avenue walkway path, the heights is, again, because of the proximity of the wetlands, as I reported previously, they had to initiate some paperwork and seeking permits from the county. So that is in progress right now. So we're hoping too that will be a fall 2023 project. And it should be not a very difficult project for us to initiate once we get started. But we do have to, we're going to do our half first and then we're going to do it all at once. It just makes sense to get the whole thing done, not half of it. On the new business, we did talk about a capital planning report, and Amber was nice enough to share with the committee this morning the items for 2024, and there were a half a dozen of them. And we talked a little bit about it, the air burner for $10,000 at the recycling center, which was basically designed for consulting services and those fees. We're going to probably have to budget money into the 2025 budget for that, the air burner itself in the future, but Amber's definitely aware of that. PD radios, $40,000, that's continuing. We budgeted some of it last year. We're going this year. EMS radios, we budgeted $5,000 last year. We're continuing with the $5,000. We do have to switch over our radios to be compatible with the radios that are used on the North Fork. There's an EMS stretcher. We get one per year. They're pretty sophisticated. They're a $30,000 expenditure. because they're very, very much needed. Road raising at Ram Island, we're putting in for design work next year, which is a cost of about $50,000 just to design. Obviously, we also will working with the Army Corps of Engineers. We'll maybe talk a little bit to them about helping us better protect that road, even if we elevate it the following year, in the 2025 budget. But we do have a master plan, and that is part of our capital plan. The last thing was facilities master plan, which we're budgeting next year $60,000, and we're budgeting $60,000 in 2025. We're trying to split the cost up. It'll cost about $120,000 to be able to do a full facilities master plan for the town. So that is something that the new town board will inherit and take a look at. We looked at, I guess it was it West Neck Road for $170,000? What was for 100?
Ram Island.
Oh, that was Ram Island Road? For the causeway? Yeah, that's right. That was for the causeway. Causeway for $170,000. That would be something that would be raising the causeway up, additional X number of inches, depending on the survey and how best to do that. But obviously, that is one of a half a dozen, but it's probably the most key because with the other ones, even with West Neck Road and things like that, there's ways around it. It's an inconvenience to have to maybe make a way around it, but you can get around it during a storm, during an emergency. Causeway is the causeway. You can't get out to the big or little Ram Island without, if the causeways are underwater by, a foot and a half, that's a problem. So, we're taking a look at that as well. So it's a good deal. We also received, as we said before, we've received money back from the state DEC on the grinder. So the grinder has paid for itself. And when you think about it, we used to rent the grinder back 6 years ago for $110,000 a year, probably about $125 now. But the grinder, we got the money back, the $355,000 back on a $710,000 expenditure, which paid off. Amber paid off the grinder, so the grinder is basically paid for, which is nice. So anything now above it, we're saving the taxpayer $125,000 annually, and I hope for the next 10 years, which will be well over $1 million, $1.25 million, and now the taxpayers wouldn't have to pay because we own our own grinder as opposed to having to rent one.
And just real quick on the grinder, Brett Page specifically from the Highway Department runs it. And last year when the company came to service it, they said they'd give us practically what we paid for it. It's in such good shape if we wanted to trade it in.
Yeah.
So I think that for the next 10 years, hopefully.
I mean, to be honest with you, with the amount of material that we get in there, you could not live. And that was the problem. We were at the beckoning call when a storm hits of getting one. Obviously, everybody's going to want to use their grinder. So we try to get the one from Southall. They say, yeah, well, after we use it for a month, we'll send it over your place. The place just fills up back there. So having the grinder available as product comes in and taking care of it, product comes in, product goes out, we do get rid of a heck of a lot of mulch. I mean, every day, truckloads and truckloads of mulch are going out of there by landscapers, and we're making some money out of that. So that too is offsetting the cost of the recycling center. We did discuss 2 electric vehicles for, in the budget. Amber brought that up. We put the senior center one off for 2025, 2026. That was about it. Amber, you think of anything else?
Okay, just one addition, but you talked a couple of times about the roads. Kenny Lewis is at a highway superintendent school this week, and I asked him to specifically talk to, whoever he had to about funding over and above, because that's what, Jay, was able to get us quite a bit of funding over and above the CHIPS, and Brian pretty much just about used it all up now. So we're ready to try again. So Kenny was going to see if, what other monies are out there.
That's good. The last thing I did have, we're not involved in this, I just shared it with with capital planning, is the new pro shop that their Shelter Island Country Club is investigating, building their own pro shop. They currently are in a 6 by 12 foot closet, literally for a pro shop. which is, that's all it is. You can't barely put anything in. It was, and they're looking to build their own, away from the building. So initially, we got a call from Linda Springer about putting it inside of the hill. But Joe went out there and said, well, by the time you build the retaining wall and all this other, and disturb all this, why don't you just look over here? So I looked at two alternate spots, and there's no doubt we have a great spot picked out for a pro shop. Should be, considerably larger than what you have right there, with a supply room in the back where you keep extra men's and women's apparel and balls and tees, things like that. That all will be funded, not by the town. That will be funded by the Shelter Island Country Club. The role of the town coming in, we might have to remove a tree or two right there, but the visibility from that area in terms of the golf carts, both privately owned and the ones that the public has access to, the ability at the first tee to regulate the first tee, so people are going off in an orderly fashion and paying to make sure that they have paid their fee to get out there, and offering people, it's a simple building. All you really need out there is electrical. It's only going to be used during, obviously, the months of May through, September or early October. But it'll be a great addition. It'll be designed in such a way, hopefully, if this goes further, to be compatible with the look of the clubhouse. But it'll be away from the clubhouse far enough that you don't, you can do something. It'd be a one-story, simple little building on a slab.
Yeah.
No basement, no.
Stephen, my only concern with that is, the country club rents that land from the town. The town owns all that. So we have to make sure whatever the lease says or how it works,
Yeah. But financially, they have done, kudos to Shelter Island Country Club for two things. Number one is that their finances have never been better. They have, 80,000 plus in their treasury now, which obviously this would take a big chunk of, but they've been so smart in terms of how they spend their money, getting their volunteers to volunteer time and energy, and the development of the golf plan itself. Kudos to Kenny Lewis and the town and Brian Sherman for pitching in, and other guys that are on the highway department that have gone over there, improved golf cart paths, put in brand new tee boxes. There's a lot of new stuff that's going in on the golf course. I always have suggested that they have some type of 5 to 10 year plan for a golf course, so that there's constant improvement. You're always looking to take that property and build it up so that the golf course, as a public golf course, becomes not a sand pit or a weed thing, but it becomes a little bit more enticing to want to go up there and play 9 or 18 holes of golf. You obviously just have to play the course twice. There's only 9 holes up there, but it's a great facility that they open up and the town opens it up for cross-country use and sleigh riding and a variety of other things, for other things other than golf. And, kudos to them. They've done a great job bringing that place back.
Thanks, Jim.
All right.
Amber?
WQI, a couple things to report from that. We will be getting, just a standard rebate application coming through for resolution. One that's coming through is Bloom, and it had a split vote on it. And the reason for the split vote, it was 3-1, so they still promoted it, pushed it up to the town board for approval, is that it's an IA system that needs to go in because of a subdivision, lot line change. And because of a merger, and you may remember when people had contiguous lots in the same name, they got merged by operation of law. So they're trying to undo this operation, merger by operation of law. So it's forced subdivision. So that's why, because is it something that's mandated by the county, and therefore we don't normally give grants to IE systems that are mandated, such as construction, et cetera. So
It's our code,
it's our code.
not WQI and not the county.
Right,
our
yes,
code.
it comes from town
Yeah.
code. So when we get that from WQI, we need to take a closer look at it. I'll give you the references for code section that we need to address? And
I think you ought to, I didn't go to the meeting, but I watched it on YouTube. I think you ought to watch it on YouTube to see the full discussion. Because I think they really did a good job of tearing it apart.
Yes.
And then said, here you go, town board. You
And it
know,
has broader implications
yes.
because we have been giving funding to emergency
Yeah.
IA system installations, which initially, an emergency one, you could put in conventional.
A non-IA.
And
This is
so-
by definition a failed system because it's pre-1972, am I
I think
right?
so. Yeah, I think so.
And so theoretically, because it's been declared failed, they don't even have to do an IA.
Although, hasn't that changed now that even failed,
I have to look, they just updated it.
Oh, did
Oh,
they?
yeah, I was gonna say, I saw that.
I have to look.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought they had to put in the IA stuff,
Okay,
but
right.
our code, once again, would say we can't,
Yeah.
so, and should we? So I don't know what the answer is, but it's something that we need to consider.
So they're done with when's it come before us?
It's just, I think, the clerk needs to finish up with the
Okay.
minutes and give everything to us. That meeting was only on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
You know, the applicant is still eligible for county and state monies. But, it could cost, the average now is about 35,000. They'd be out, 15,000. It's not small money.
Right. And then the other item of business was they were working on the final edits for the WQI application forms and instructions. So that will be coming to us. It is redlined so that we do know what kinds of changes that they've made. They've tried to clean it up and make it easier for people applying, the applicants, to get through the system easier. There are questions at the very end, and maybe even throughout, but I just definitely towards the back of the application. So look at it closely because they've left open questions. So they want to, originally we used to give town grants for 15,000. And then we looked at what the average was of how much it was costing people to put the installations in, as well as how much funding we had. And so we were concerned, this was pre-COVID, we reduced the amount of the grants to 6,000. Then COVID hit and then all these transfers took place, and so our coffers have gone up. But construction costs, cost to
Right.
install have gone up as well. So they are recommending that we go from 6 to 12,000, and they've also tweaked if you put it in a pressurized shallow drain field, and if you have to relocate your well, a little bit of a tweak there as well.
I think that's great.
So that should be coming to us, and my computer just stopped again. We've been having issues. I don't know who else is, I know you were.
Microsoft Outlook nationwide have had
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
all day yesterday.
Yeah, so I was about to give you an update on the dollar amounts of how much money we have in WQI funds, but
Pay for us.
maybe we'll do that next week. I can't believe that just happened. But I think it's the same thing that happened to your computer yesterday.
It's been freezing
It just,
constantly.
yeah, restarted itself. So anyways, so I'll give you the money update next week.
Great.
And I even had numbers of the number of grants we've given out, the number of grants that have been, how many have been granted and how many have been fulfilled.
Right.
So I have some of that.
And
And
talk to Amber, just out of curiosity about resale of homes with existing septics that are X number of years or more older, that some type of assessment is done, at the transfer, and that, again, wouldn't have to be done prior to the person moving in, but they would have 24 months or so, or 36 months, or whatever a reasonable amount of time is in order to put a convert over, especially, let's say the, system's 35 years older, that person goes in there and says that, the current septic system is in poor shape. And it doesn't stop the transfer, it allows for the transfer, but
Is anybody doing that?
well, I think first.
Any other towns?
that was, the reason I brought it up is it was discussed by Pat, it was discussed, it has been discussed.
Transfer.
No, upon transfer, but we are also talking about the CO, right?
Correct.
So, maybe you could come up with a little code maybe for us.
There is something, I've told the board in the past.
To get the
that
conversation.
Southampton has
Yeah, get the conversation.
that divides the town up into high priority, low priority zones, and if you're in the high priority zone, if you're doing certain type of work, it triggers, and this was before the county, updated their requirements, but, so you do have some latitude. I just gotta see, you can't really run afoul of the county regs, but I can look into it.
Yeah.
Well, the county is looking to do that. They're just not, they're just not ready yet. They don't have the resources to handle the uptick in applications they would be getting. But that's part of their long-term plan, is to make it mandatory to upgrade upon property transfer.
Yeah.
So that's something they have in the queue. They just don't have the means to
Could
handle it
we
countywide yet.
Yeah, could we require it of the seller? And then, not necessarily grant-based? I don't know, I'm just saying, we could just maybe start this conversation.
Yeah, no, and that, I mean, they wanted to get this like cleaned up in good shape.
Yeah.
And then they want to start working on like a concierge service
Right.
by the town so that we can help people step through it and actually go to neighborhoods and say, hey, like, we can help you do this. And if we get you and your neighbor 3 doors down and the guy across the street, like if we can do them all at the same time, we may be able to get some economies of scale.
Right.
Something along those lines.
But obviously, there's a big difference. A person just had a house built and used a conventional septic system built 8 years ago versus a house that's now, and sells the houses, who have been there 8 years and wants to sell the house with that very updated conventional system versus a house that's been there for 70 years and the septic has been sitting there for our last 45 years untouched, been pumped out once, twice, but it is doomed to be in poor quality. It would seem to me that, there has to be some type of an assessment made where, you go into category 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you're in category 1, it's incumbent upon you to do this. At the time of transfer, at category 2, you have 2 to 3 years in it. Category 3, you have, 5 to 7 years, whatever. I'm just talking out loud. You could sit down and think outside the box on how that might be done. Because obviously the name of the game, and we are, and as I said to that meeting with Megan and Petter, statistically, we're moving ahead better than most towns on the East End in terms of percentages of IA systems in the ground. I mean, I didn't bring the name up. They brought the names up, doing a great job and getting these things in. But again, we're an island that wants to protect water quality. We should really keep pushing to get this thing done, especially in areas that old systems, areas that are in high nitrogen issue problems. Anything we can devise to try to ease into it, as BJ just said, at least start the conversation. So people, once they hear the conversation for a few years, they're a little bit more attuned to saying, hey, I know I've heard people talk about that. Maybe it's a good idea. As opposed to catching them blind.
I mean, because we've gotten a lot of the low hanging fruit, people who, were really into it, want to do it. So now we have to move to the next. And people have gotten more comfortable with it, as you just said. So we can push it a little bit.
Yeah.
That was it.
Okay, BJ?
Yeah, just to know, I don't know if I told you this, Christina, Kate Rossi Snook, I asked her to give an update. She was getting back into the water in early May to see how last year's project went in Cockles Harbor. So she, next Tuesday, maybe if we have time in the agenda to put her on for the work session.
Context.
What's context?
Some people might not know.
Oh, it's the habitat restoration in Cockles Harbor, all the shellfish were not quiet.
The oyster reef.
Yeah, the oyster reef, yeah. I don't know where this came up. I have a random note on my pad that that perhaps we should consider assigning a liaison to the ADU initiative, a town board liaison to help wherever possible, that there is a deadline to getting that money spent.
CLI grant?
Yeah.
Meeting that I'm going to tomorrow.
Yeah.
So maybe, but no, not that necessarily didn't have to be you, so it could even be, Christina. It could be, to help facilitate and just be another pair of hands and another brain in the room. Just because I think it could wind up to be a fair amount of work and people needing a lot of guidance.
Yeah, I thought that was more Liz Hanley's group, because
Yeah.
it's really, the town's not technically involved in that grant.
Right.
But
No,
there is
that I know.
information- There is
Yeah.
information that they're going to need,
Right.
so Reed Karen's going to be participating, I think Ian is
Yeah.
coming, I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly. and
That's
I can't-
tomorrow's
So that's
meeting?
trying to get-
Yeah, that's
We
tomorrow.
can talk about it.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go.
Yeah.
And.
No, because
No.
then it becomes a quorum. It's
Oh,
not a
right.
public meeting, it's an internal meeting.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
we,
No, I won't go.
it's not only 3 community housing board members. I don't know if you were planning on
What time
attending.
is it?
Yeah, because we wanted to just
5
keep it
o'clock.
a truly working.
5
session.
o'clock.
5 o'clock?
5
Yeah, I
to
can-
7 PM.
Yeah, I can make.
Yeah.
I attended a library function over the weekend that was talking about the expansion and all of that. It was pretty well attended. And a presentation by Terry Lucas of the library. I find it just a very exciting project. I mean, I think it could really, there's a lot in there for almost every sector of the community now. It's already at the library, actually, but it's all jammed in there. It'd be nice to have a nice facility. I could see our senior program having more events there, just because it'll be a nicer south-facing Italian. I go to the light. So I think that, just to say that they're working hard on that, the library is. It was a WMAC meeting last night. The program that we initiated with Surfrider and Peconic Baykeeper has started the testing. It started Monday. Bo took samples, 2 places, to the 2 anchorages, and worked out a way that he got it to the South Ferry, and someone picked it up to take it to the lab. There's a time limit on that.
BJ, what they're gonna do is at both anchorage areas?
Both anchorages. Yep. And the results will be back tomorrow or Wednesday. Bo's going to send us WMAC a link that, to the website, so we'll be able to monitor this pretty much as it happens.
So is it, trying to do it after the weekends, is that?
Yeah, every Monday.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So it'll be good data to have. There were it was interesting. We turned down a dock, all this 0 to 6. I mean, a dock was rejected, which I don't think that might be the first time
Based on what? Okay.
It was length. It would require too many variances. And they were just like, come back with a dock that's within, because there was no
Right.
hardship demonstrated,
Yeah.
no, lack of water or any of that. Also we went to consider a dredging application, and it was revealed in the moment that the dredging had been completed on an application WMAC hadn't seen yet, and we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, Stephen, we need to talk.
So we
about
need to
it.
talk about
Yeah,
that.
it's set for a public hearing tonight.
Yeah, exactly. The dredging is for a public hearing tonight.
Is it?
Yeah.
Just because, mind if I jump in?
Please.
Okay. So you first start with dredging with 5316. That requires, for dredging, get a permit from the Shelter Island Town Board. It doesn't speak any more into like what the standards are and what you have to do to get that permit, just says you have to procure a permit. So we've been doing it.
What section is it? I mean, what?
This is the docks chapter, but it's within the other water control devices section, and that's, dredging.
Right.
Then you go to 5318 of the docks chapter, and it says, in addition to the requirement of this chapter, any dredging in and on or over a wetland or within a regulated area as defined in chapter 129 shall apply for a permit under chapter 129, that's wetlands. So in my reading of that, you would need a wetlands permit, as well as this town board permit to dredge.
Stupid question. Wouldn't any dredging be in wetlands?
Yeah, well, so they have
Not the
definitions.
spoils.
So, you have the definition of dredging, and then you have the definitions of what is a tidal wetland and a freshwater wetland. And if the project falls within those definitions, yes, you need a wetlands permit. But heretofore, I don't think the town was requiring people to do wetlands permits for dredging, even though that runs counter to what the law says.
Yeah,
So
no,
that's something that.
So realistically, the only dredging the town's involved with is Highbury Lane, South Ferry Hills, Mabel's Creek,
What do you mean that we're involved with, in terms of approving it or doing it? Actually doing it?
either doing it or
Yeah.
working, being aware of it.
Aware of it, I know.
You know,
Yeah, I thought some of those hired private companies.
they do, but,
Yeah.
as we approve it.
Yeah,
We never approved it wetlands wise, we just approved.
this wise, yeah. WMAC.
Submitted an application and then
Right.
it goes to a resolution.
Right.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
you say it goes to a resolution, have you always required hearings in connection with it?
In the past, no, but since I've started, we've thrown hearings on there, so the WMAC reviews it, the town board reviews it, public hearing,
Right.
so they get more consistent.
It
But
makes
it's never
sense.
been a wetland.
It definitely makes sense that you have a hearing in connection with a dredging permit on the town board level.
Yeah.
But now I think we have to make people going forward have to procure a wetlands permit. Again, if it falls within the definition.
And there's a question, did the contractor, probably has worked here before, aware that there's a need for a permit and went ahead without a permit? Don't know, what the homeowner
They have a
knew.
DEC permit?
They had the deeds, and it's a 5-year permit because this gets dredged on, it's all a private boat basin.
Right.
Yeah.
Gets dredged on a regular, semi-annual, every
Yeah.
3-year basis, so
Yeah.
they get a,
Frequently.
yeah.
Yeah, depends, but it's only a few years.
I'm not saying that damage was done, I'm not
No.
implying that, but it's not
Back-
egregious,
follow the
but really,
rules.
you're supposed to get a permit, the person's been through the process before. Just, he's not new to the dance. So,
It just sounds like another one of the processes that has been happening incorrectly.
right.
Just
Right,
sort of like some of the other things we've been trying to clean up.
look, yeah,
It
right.
sounds like a similar situation.
So incorrectly,
Expectations aren't clear and
Right.
that
But the-
maybe we need a better flow chart. I don't know.
go for it, Meg. No, but I think this owner knew the permit of this town level was necessary. And we should probably look into a letter, maybe, a letter.
A stern letter. Stern letter.
The stern letter, that this, it shouldn't just be assumed. Manatee Creek people came last night, Alice Dupree and Dupree, and Linda McCarthy, and again, just talked up the problems that are in, the creek is having, and how their Manatee Creek Association is, starting to form and get it together to address those problems. I don't think there's anything here for us. They got a lot, I think they've got some good advice from the WMAC and their collective wisdom. Speaking of, John Needham last night said that he read, I think he said the original resolution that established the WMAC. And their remit is really, really concerns the health and welfare of our shoreline, of our waters and our shore. And we have this other document that's pretty long that published at around the same time that it was established as well, what it was supposed to do. And he said, and we have kind of devolved, I think he said evolved, but I would say devolved, to just considering docks and moorings. They don't really do that. We've got Matt Williams now. He came and did the water review for us. He's interested in the science. I think if everything goes well with your hiring, and that by the end of the year, we should alter the code so moorings come. WMAC doesn't need to be concerned with them anymore. They could be just done between Bo and Amber's office, right? As it is in most towns. Docks, of course, still, I think will need, and even more scrutiny perhaps in the future, because we've said all the easy docks have been built. And then the town board needs to do its part in directing, the WMAC of what we would like them to focus on. We do it with WAC, where a question comes up, we don't necessarily have the staff for it, and we throw it over to the experts to help us explore the question. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there. I think that's a good timeline by the end of the year to have this sorted, the mooring thing. Okay, that's it.
Okay, Stephen?
Nothing.
Amber?
Screen's back up if you want to hear about WQI money.
Go for it. Yeah.
just to bore you with a few numbers. The monies that we've brought in from the CPF revenues, the first year that monies were initially available started in 2016. We started the program in 2017 with those 2016 numbers. In the early years, we were getting about $400,000 per year. 2019, it dipped down to 226. It was 310,000. Then the pandemic hit, and the numbers coming in just to WQI was 617,000. From 2021, we received in 1,016,000. So that like really helped like beef up the coffers. Last year.
A million, how much?
1,016,000. And then 573,000 last year. So cumulatively, since we, this legislation was passed, WQI received $3.5 million. So that's quite substantial. We have spent money, we've encumbered money for rebates, 1.1 million. That's 86 rebates out there. And then we've set money aside for shellfish seeding, Fresh Pond, the Cornell Cooperative Extension, Reed's Beach Septic System, and we've released funds on 59 grants, although we only paid out on 51. There were 8 that either withdrew or properties were sold before. People just said, when the IRS thing was going on, that they didn't want to, that they would reapply once that was cleared up. So we have spent, let's see, well, we've got, my screen is, sorry. We have total unspent cash at the moment of $2.9 million, but we have 710,000 set aside for specific projects at this point in time. So funds available for new projects is 2.2 million. So just, those are the broad numbers for people to just know what's going on.
And so if this initiative that I put out there, 50 new IAs a year, alone, but plus there's other things that are now coming before us, we will draw that down, I don't know, 8 months. But no, I mean,
It'd be nice to start,
Yeah.
spending it, especially, things got held up during the pandemic because people weren't working, and then the county hack, between the pandemic affecting the county and then the hack.
Yeah.
Things are starting to loosen up, and also
They're
they,
gonna come back in.
and they
Yeah.
also needed to get some of their funding back in place so that people could get those grants. So
Amber, you mentioned 1.2 million for 2021.
Mhm.
Do you have the 2022 numbers at all?
The 2022,
573.
573.
573.
Yep.
So that was about half, right? A little bit less than half of the year before.
So that was all the information to close out.
Do we anticipate in 2023 that that 573 would be lofty and that it's going to be
Oh,
below
it's going to
that?
be way down. We've only,
Yeah.
like WQI's only gotten in, its piece would be 50,000 so far this year. So it's a market.
So that,
drop-off
I
at this
just
point.
want everybody to,
I mean, that's only through February.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there's very
There's
little
always a delay.
inventory, I
Yeah.
understand, and
Yeah.
the
but
interest
this is
rate.
not going away soon. I mean, this is a trend.
Yeah.
So you have to project that out a little bit, that 1.2 million to 617,000 from 2019 or so. That 2/3 of that money came from a couple of years,
Yeah.
These funds are not going to be there.
And the other thing is though, that, the average price of the house in this place keeps going up
Yes.
and up and up.
Correct.
So there's that.
Yep.
But now that Shelby's back, we had set up a separate class account for WQI as well as a separate checking account. So now that Shelby's back, she's reviewing what I had pulled together. It's gone to the auditors as well as the contract accountants to review. So Gordon, to make your life easier on the CPF side, you won't have the commingling of the WQI funds in the bank accounts that you're looking at, so that it'll make it easier for you to know how much is available for CPF projects. So we're finally getting there.
And Amber, are we using the same auditor for CPF this year?
Yes.
I mean,
it's,
2022?
Yes, CFM,
Yeah.
Craig Fitzsimmons, and I can't remember the,
Yeah,
yes.
great.
Mhm.
The one, yeah.
Just as a little tidbit to chew on, water quality improvement project as defined in the WQI section includes the construction of public water mains and connections to provide drinking water to inhabitants whose drinking water supply has been contaminated by toxic chemicals as defined in blah, 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 of environmental conservation law, hazardous substances as defined in ECL, or emerging contaminants as defined in public health law.
That was Quogue. They were able to do a new water system, and they had PFAS. But nitrates don't qualify.
No, but there's 3 definitions, so we
Right.
should explore, because once we do the testing, I'm gonna see what exactly is in the water, and if it falls within one of those 3 definitions, then you might be able to use WQI by.
Well, the
Nitrates-
testing.
Nitrates could qualify, I think.
The way Joe was talking, I assumed they did.
No,
If
for
it's-
WQI,
It's
you know-
emerging contaminants.
Yeah, it's
So if
not-
we're identifying new areas that are contaminated. I mean, it
Yeah.
definitely needs looking at.
No, no, I think it needs to be explored. I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's a viable option, but it
Yeah.
is an option. to
Yeah,
look
yeah,
at.
yeah.
It is questionable, because if you follow the definitions that you're talking about, in one of the definitions,
it's excluded because it can be used as a fertilizer in farming, and so they consider that probably the source.
there's a whole question about it. Follow the definitions. Yeah, there was a state question I had about it, like at the state level, the definitions.
Yeah, so let's definitely see what's
So-
in the water first and see
Yeah.
if we can shoehorn it into any one of these definitions, and if you can, there's your money.
Well, Jerry,
Well, we also still have ARPA money too.
Yeah.
That's available for infrastructure.
I mean, I know, I'm trying to get the right word that's not too pugnacious. To get Fred Thiel to reestablish the group that is that these questions
Yeah.
would come before that group and help us all determine, to make these funds as useful as possible for what they were meant to be used for.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, he's mentioned it numerous times, but I think he was just bogged down with the budget. so.
Yeah, oh, right, okay.
No, but
What?
do we have to wait for him, or can we reach out to the respective towns and say, hey, let's form a committee?
Do that, Gordon?
Sorry?
Maybe, well, Gordon could reach out to his,
Your counterparts.
your counterparts and,
Like, I don't think we have to
Are you-
wait for Fred, we can do it ourselves.
It's long overdue, we really should, this has been such a long.
Yeah, fortunately, have you come up to the podium.
yeah, our Zoom audience wants to hear from you.
Gordon Gooding again. I think it's, we all know it's been long overdue, and I think it would really resolve a lot of the issues in these definitions, and this way, once we have once it's clear, then we're not subject to what you think, I think, or anybody else thinks. It's there. Okay,
Consistency.
so it's clear and fine, and that's the rules, okay? But I think where we are now, it's really left to interpretation, and I think they really made the legislation a little on the loose side so that each town could use it appropriately. I mean, we got a lot of loose stuff that's floating around, but I think that committee is really important, I think, and that would resolve a whole lot of stuff that people question on a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis.
Let's do this. I'll call Fred, and then I'll call Jay Steineman, and we'll get on the agenda for the next East End Supervisor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know you come to it.
Yeah, I think that would just resolve a whole,
Yeah.
because right now, everybody is looking at, it's like looking at people, they've got 8 different opinions of really how it's supposed to be applied, depending on where you're coming from. And I think if you have it clarified, and this way, it's not about what you think it could be used for, that's what the consensus, and that's what that opinion board was all about earlier
I
on.
think it's very helpful.
I
I
mean,
read
that
the
whole,
whole stuff.
we even had things in that opinion board, even on community housing.
Yep.
That were never addressed, okay, so, but anyhow, that's all I can say. I think it's a good idea, and I really do like that separation of money, because it makes it, I'm not concerned about WQI, because it's just hanging out there. So this way, it's clear, and both committees should have a financial report, so they know what things they're looking at, is whether or not they can do them, or they can't do them, and, the same thing with what you can spend it on, like we just talked about.
Okay. Julie, you have anything? Anybody else? Gordon, anything else? Anybody else in the Zoom audience? Okay, I'm gonna make a motion. We close the work session and go into executive session to discuss some potential acquisitions and contract negotiations. Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.